Hi, and I am really excited to be back with another quick webinar with Family Law Software. Anna Tate is with us today. She's the Director of Sales and Training for Family Law Software, which is a cloud based program designed and built by family law attorneys and tax professionals to calculate child and spousal support, divide property, quickly generate compelling financial analysis. I use it every single day in my practice. Um, so, welcome, Anna.
Thank you, Jackie, for having me. I'm really excited to talk about spousal support present value.
So, yeah, that is an important topic that comes up in a lot of cases that I work on. And a lot of times I even get phone calls from attorneys who are in the middle of mediation and say, "Hey, can you run this for me really quick? What's the present value if we wanted to do a buyout on spousal support?" So, I love that we're featuring this in this episode to show how attorneys could do this, manage this on their own. So, excited to see. Yes.
um, all right, let me share my screen.
So, let's see how this works.
Yeah, 100%. So this is Family Law Software's alimony present value buyout calculator. And the idea and the way the calculator initially works is if you use Family Law Software to calculate child support and you already used a spousal support number as a part of that calculation, when you come to the screen, we assume that just for fun, you'd want to know what the present value would be if spousal support were $900 a month paid through this period. And the result is actually automatic. And so we see what the present value of support is. And for lawyers who might not understand like what a present value is or what a discount rate is, Family Law Software is doing that calculation. And these are the assumptions that we make. If I made a file now, right now it's at 4%. Later it could be higher or lower. And so if you ever have a question about what this discount rate is in Family Law Software, we use a 20-year treasury bond, which is considered safe. Like if I put my money in this treasury bond, I'm going to get that back at the end of the day despite other market conditions. So that's going to be the baseline of the calculator. And I guess the question for Jackie and other professionals is, why would we do this? Like when you have clients that have the funds to do this, what is their rationale for not making monthly payments?
Oh, there could be a lot of reasons. It could be that what they want to be done with each other. They just want to go their own separate ways. It could be that there are a lot of assets that the people can play around with, but their cash flow is going to be tight. There are a plethora of reasons.
Mhm.
Obviously, for the person who's receiving support, this becomes non modifiable support. And so they have the money up front and they can invest the money. Like you said, that you can use a 4% is a safe rate of return that they could expect to get on those assets, but they have it and they don't need to worry about what's going to happen if I get remarried or what's going to happen if my spouse loses their job. So there's more security. And for the person who's the payer, a lot of times they want to give a lump sum because they want to be done. They want to know that any increase in their earnings is not going to affect future support. And if there are the funds available, a lot of times what we're looking at is one person, the lower wage earner, maybe wanting to keep the marital home. And instead of having to pay out the other spouse their share of the equity, they might take a partial or a full lump sum buyout and spousal support to offset that. So we can be really creative in using a lump sum present value on spousal support. Having the information at your fingertips like this is pretty fantastic. Anna, can we show what the difference is in a change in the interest rate? How that would
Yes, of course. So I could increase this to 6, right? Or, the market's going gangbuster, right? The stock market, you'd get 8, you could get 20, right? So that rate could change 100%. And so, Jackie, why would you change this rate and for which client and like why would that be a compelling argument?
So I always tell attorneys and clients that there's an inverse relationship between interest rates and lump sums. So the lower the rate, the higher the lump sum and vice versa. I am not going to advocate that we use, a certain lump sum, a certain rate to get a higher or lower lump sum. What I am going to talk with the client about is what they think they could earn on that money. So a lot of times I might have the other side saying something along the line of, well, they could go out and earn 10%.
Mhm.
And so, the 10%, again, higher rate means a lower lump sum. So they're trying to, convince us that they should pay a lower dollar amount. And that's not reasonable. I want to make sure that we're looking at reasonable rates of returns that clients could get in the market. And there is certainly, there does need to be a discount rate applied because money upfront today is worth more than money in the future due to inflation. We could even use, an inflation adjusted rate. So it does make sense to use a rate. I think that there is certainly, in the cases that I work in, there's wiggle room on the rate. In other states, it might not be like that, and it might be that there's a certain rate you have to use on a present value. But in Michigan, based on my understanding, we can negotiate the rate.
Mhm. And what's awesome about family law software is we have to make certain assumptions, right? To make these calculators work, family law software has to make assumptions. And so in the program, when you see a rate that you didn't put in, there's usually going to be an explanation about why that rate is that number. And usually it's a safe rate, right? Or current inflation, over time, right? It's not inflation from the news, or it's not. So these numbers are not necessarily what you would see in the news or what is being returned in the market. They're going to be safe rates, and these can all be adjusted. And for lawyers who feel super uncomfortable about this, which sure, right? Yeah, like these are big numbers sometimes. We have explanations throughout the program about why these numbers might be different for the recipient or the payor. And we also have graphs that kind of help with this explanation about why we're making these suggestions, because ultimately, we're trying to get to settlement, right, for a particular purpose. And the biggest issue is how much spousal support, right? So, like, what is
Yeah.
this number? So, Jackie, what other tool in family law software do you use to help you figure out what this number could or should be?
So I really like to use the balance incomes calculations because there are other software programs, and even inside of family law software, which we previewed on a different episode, um, there is a family law software alimony calculator built in, and I like that calculator because it makes logical sense to me. But another way to look at what number should we start with for purposes of support would be looking at the combined after-tax income of the parties and how that combined after-tax income is split between them. So if one person has 80% of the combined net after tax income, the other one has 20, that kind of balancing it, I can say, well, what if I wanted the low wage earner to, my best case scenario is I want them to get 40%. And I love that family law software can help me calculate that and use that as a tool. So I like in this situation, so again, this was so easy. You put in 40% and it says, okay, the lower wage earner here needs to get 1,855 a month in spousal support to get them to 40%. And then if I want to show an attorney, if I click on show another column, I can um, I can look at what 35% is.
I type in 35.
And then I can show another column that shows 50%. So again, that gives us a pretty big range.
It
And
is a big range. And just to point out really quick, so for attorneys that are watching this, if you ever wonder what this tool does again or why we would do this, essentially we're thinking of the couple as a business, and the business is breaking up and people are walking away with the cash flow, right, of that relationship. And family law software is taking in effect taxes as well. So there is an explanation at the top about what these percents are and what they mean. And it's really cool to have a range because, and we can see that range is varying wildly, obviously. And what I was talking with Jackie about as well is that sometimes this number is very common for lawyers to want to see the 50-50 because this is either your best day ever or just not even possible, right? So if a number is being thrown around in this range, you can pretty confidently say we are kind of like outside that scope. And so, and then Jackie was saying that we've kind of started with the 40-60 or possibly 35-65.
right. And then can you show the expanded report? Because I will get questions on, well, how does it come up with this number? And I don't want to say, oh, it's calculating it in the background. Like I want to be able to see how it calculated this number.
100%. We always show our work at Family Law Software. So in this situation, we actually have three columns. And so there's actually like a quick summary. If I click support impact, there's going to be like a short summary of what these three numbers mean. And you can see the percent of combined here. Like it's a quick math look, right? I got my 50-50, 35, and then we show like the amount they have. But we take it another level, right? So it's not just about income support. What about the taxes? So if I click expanded report in the alternative, it takes this report and it like triples in size. And it really
Yeah.
shows the math. So when I do the expanded report, right, we have the three-way again. And as I scroll down, it has all of the income that's being factored. That income is being tax affected. On each line, we have the respective spousal support and child support here on lines 23 and 24. And then you can see those percents here that we are dividing that cash to meet their living expenses based off of those percents. So that's how Family Law Software is running the calculation and then showing you our work in the expanded report.
I love this. This to me is, I mean, this is worth the software, this one piece, because it's just so clear. There's no arguing about, well, maybe you did the taxes wrong. I'm trusting that the software has the tax calculations, that it's doing it correctly, but to have it spelled out like this is really helpful in a negotiation.
100%. So let's take this number and do something more with it, right? So let's say the parties agree to this number and then we want to go back to present value, right? All of these tools are supposed to be linked together and show and get the parties to resolution. So if lump sum is still really the main primary factor, we've got our 1855. I go back to the present value calculator. So instead of using the support that I've used in other areas
Sarah Coupe.
of the program, I'll put in the 1855. We'll just say it was for 60 months or whatever period it was. I update, and now we've redone the calculation with the other support number that's in negotiation or contention and the amount of months. And then the analysis begins again, right? Like, are we going to use the safe rate? How many months will this last? Or what is the amount? And Family Law Software has updated all of the explanations and all the reports with this new possible solution.
I love it. Yep. Perfect. Thank you so much, Anna. If somebody wants to get a hold of the family law software and try a demo, they can do that. We'll have all of the contact information. This is going to show up in our newsletter, so we'll have all the contact information there. Is there any other information that you want to provide to anyone watching this?
Yeah, I mean, check us out. We have a free 14-day trial online so you can come and play with your real case that you are actually trying to solve and see how this can actually change your business and change the way you look at cases.
Thanks so much, Anna.
Thanks, Jackie.